to move on to WNBA Finals. The Liberty Aces start Sunday at 3 p.m. amid the WNBA being very weird on Twitter and teasing expansion, but just being really cryptic and weird about it, which feels very on brand. Very quick, the last WNBA note I want to just hit before we move on to the full preview. Aaliyah Boston, unanimous Rookie of the Year. Well-deserved. Zero questions that this was deserved. She's not going to play overseas, and this is good. I think this is the kind of thing where Sabrina hasn't played overseas. I think Asia did 1 year and has not since. She's not. I can't imagine there's a world where Caitlin Clark or Paige Beckers or Angel Reese or any of them are going to play overseas. It doesn't seem like that's going to be in their future. This is really good if the league, especially the league at some point, is going to get to expand the season. Then that's maybe 5 years, 10 years down the line, something like that. But I think it's a really good thing for the league if these players are not going to
expand it. How? Because this year is the longest season that they've had.
Let's start with longer playoff series. Expand it that way.
Yeah. Well, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is good. It's been a continuation, right? Like Asia has never played overseas. A lot of the older players since the latest collective bargaining agreement have not. You might be right about Sabrina. I had it in my head that she never did either.
So I thought Asia did. I thought Asia did one time, like in China or something like that.
I don't believe so.
I'm gonna look this up. If I'm wrong, I apologize.
Either way, I think that's one of the most concrete legacies of the 2020 collective bargaining agreement. Even though there are limitations, I would say
I was right.
She did play.
Yeah,
okay.
For the
regardless,
for the Red Wolves and the Women's Chinese Basketball Association for the 2018-19 offseason.
Cool. So, yeah, I think that's one of the most concrete things you can point to is that the threshold, the baseline of salaries and off-court opportunities and things like that has been lifted to the point where a lot of these people don't have to do it. And, I think the ultimate goal is that the 12th player on the bench also doesn't have to do that. But it's a good step that at least the biggest faces, the biggest voices, the people that represent the league are here all year, because then they can also be marketing the league and making appearances and doing advertisements and all the other types of things that also help people find out about who they are, what the league's all about, what the game is, so that when the games do come, when the league season is longer, when everything is bigger, it's not as much of a pivot to, oh, wow, now everybody's here again, and what are we going to do with all their time? It's not going to have to be that, because it is going to be gradual, and we're seeing that with, like what you said, this exact thing.
Yes. All right, let's move on to full finals preview. We're going to break down a bunch of different categories here. Brendon, let's start with the key matchup. You in our notes have the same one I do, so I'll let you'll key this off.
It's going to be about the front courts. I think that's pretty obvious when you have top three MVP finishers, two of the best, probably the two best players in the league, in Breanna Stewart for New York and A'ja Wilson for the Las Vegas Aces, matching up against one another quite a bit. And I think if you take it a step further, what we saw throughout the throughout the regular season when these teams faced off, the Liberty were 3-2 in the 5 games that these teams played. What we saw was how the Aces, especially after Candace Parker got hurt, attempted to cobble together a rotation, a scheme on both ends that could match the size of New York while also maintaining their own identity and being effective on both sides of the court. And I don't think that will change in these finals. How many minutes can they get away playing Kia Stokes? How close can they be on the glass and at the free throw line and some of those categories? And then, of course, who plays better between A'ja Wilson and Breanna Stewart? So I think everything is going to come down to the 4 and 5 spots in this series, and that's probably going to decide who wins.
I think that's right. And I think the Jonquel Jones thing is a fun thing to zero in on here, because she was in the finals last year with the Sun, and they didn't really push the Aces or A'ja Wilson particularly hard. Jonquel Jones, and then in the last couple of matches between these teams, has been very impactful. She was just the key player for them to close out against the Sun and get to this series. I think Stewie at the 5 is obviously going to be a really big deal. Those lineups and how she defends Asia in the block is going to be a big deal. Those looks through, I think, some real trouble at Asia Wilson and clearly frustrated her based on how fired up she was after some of those games. Remember when she was in Brooklyn and after they lost and was like, I don't need to be validated or whatever. She said she was clearly annoyed by the MVP, some of the stuff going on there. I think you're staring at this and thinking, okay, this is also like maybe a Dolson series at times. You just see her in spurts just to at least have another body out there, give some fouls, eat some innings. I think that's if you had to give the advantage to one team in their bigs, would you give it to? I think I might lean the Liberty, just because I trust.
It has to be the Liberty. I mean, that was the whole story of the regular season, was that particular matchup favored the Liberty. I mean, how could you pick otherwise? The Aces have one, and you just listed 3 who the Liberty have that are playable.
Right, and even if you say, like, okay, Stewie's just kind of a basket. Like, I would say let's pull Stewie out of that for a second just because she kind of does a little bit of everything. If it's Jonquel and Dolson, and Asia's the only playable big on the Aces, it still feels a little bit like a Liberty advantage, which is going to be very fun. And Asia, I think has to be monster in the series if the series gets out of hand for the Aces. If some of the stuff the Liberty did that really struggled, that made Asia, I think, get frustrated and struggle a little bit. If it works again, this series tilts so much in the favor of the Liberty in a very, very drastic way, like in a hurry. I think if it pops that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the point you made about the finals last year is an interesting maybe place to jump off. It kind of leads me to my X factor, but I don't know if you had more to say there. I just think Jonquel Jones did play well in the finals last year to a degree, right? So she owned the offensive glass. She had her totals in that. Hold on, let me get it right. But I believe that she completely owned the glass in a way, and really what the difference is Chelsea Gray was the Finals MVP last year. Her ability, and she's not my X factor, but the point is that her ability to get to that mid-range, attack Jonquel Jones in the drop defense that she played, be just a neutralizer of all the length and physicality that Connecticut throws at you, went a really long way. And so that's going to be how the Aces try to do the same. More so, you can't fight fire with fire. They just don't have the bodies, as you just said. So my X factor is more Kelsey Plum, actually.
Yeah.
In this case, because I think her not playing well, her not feeling and looking like herself last year or this year throughout the regular season in these matchups was a pretty big reason why I think that they weren't able to be effective. Because, you know, Jackie Young did more on the ball this year. I still don't think that she's going to be your kind of every possession point guard necessarily. Chelsea Gray, I kind of just expect it to come as often as it needs to, but also not somebody because of her. She's not going to take pull-up threes. She's not really going to like drive to the free throw, drive to the basket, get to the free throw line. Like she is really, floaters, mid-range pull-ups, jumpers, passing out of that and getting it downhill in transition. That type of stuff is more her game. I think the one player who can consistently break down a defense, create advantages, create space, create openings for herself and her teammates is Plum. And so if she can do that, you see their ball movement start to get better. You see that really be a rising tide for everybody else on the roster. And a lot of the size concerns and all the things we picked apart when these teams faced off, it just becomes less of an issue because they do have the offensive firepower to beat anybody. It's just about how do you unlock that and who do you use to try to unlock that and what are the things you try to pick at. And so that leads me to the last reason I think she's an X factor, which is that Sabrina Ionescu is going to guard her most of the time. And I think you and I were both pretty confused by the fact that it didn't feel like Vegas was consistently ready to attack her or Courtney Vandersloot throughout the regular season. But it just felt like they left so much meat on the bone there.
Did it feel more? Maybe this is just I'm tilted by the game I saw in person, but I felt like they were more eager to attack Sabrina than Vandersloot.
Yeah, well, I think Sabrina's just a
not good defender.
Yeah, and I think Vandersloot, at least as a point of attack defender, can stay with her matchup and has a higher IQ defensively and is able to use her hands and create steals. Like, there's at least some ways that you see Vandersloot impact the game, and she at least rotates and executes a scheme a little bit better. Whereas I think you just have the disadvantage from Sabrina's standpoint of, like, physically she's at a disadvantage, and I just don't think she reads the game enough to make impact plays. So she's really just kind of a big negative no matter how you slice it. So if I'm them, like, I thought they got great stuff using Chelsea Gray as a screener toward the end of the regular season matchups. I think those are ways you can try to neutralize. You know, if Alicia Clark makes a few more jumpers in those matchups, we might be talking about a different result on the whole in those 5 games. So putting the ball in Plum's hands, whether that's initiating or on the second side or in transition, and just letting her threateningness, that's not a word, but I'm using it as one, offensively pose problems for New York and put them into a panic situation as a defense, like, that feels like kind of the key to unlock a lot that they weren't able to when they lost to them during the regular season.
I think that's a great X factor. She was on my short list. I actually thought I gamed myself maybe out of talking more about Jonquel Jones because I think she might be the really simple answer here. Because I just think the Liberty are not winning the series unless Jonquel Jones is giving you like an A-level series, unless she's on the whole time.
Let's just follow up on that, because I think you and I have a little bit of a different view of the Liberty defense, because I think, like you said, the 5-out lineups when Stewie's at the 5. I think what Asia struggled with is when they went big and there was help in addition to being stymied by her one-on-one matchup. Like, I think Stewie did a good job guarding her one-on-one as a face-up player, post player, whatever. I think the issue was how many bodies and hands were between her and the basket when she got the ball, and just having to make such quick decisions and make such tough shots. So that's another place where Jonquel is going to be huge. She has to be that second layer of defense, and how do they limit her from being able to be that, I think is a question on Vegas' side.
No, I think that's right. I think when I'm saying it, I'm thinking it's the better way to say it would have been the Liberty have this ability to throw different looks. They're not tied to one look where it's, hey, Jonquel, you're defending Asia. Great. We can put Stu on you. We can put Dolson on you. We can throw traps at you. We can get a little I think you're going to see Asia probably get whacked a little bit in the post on some doubles. Like, I think that's going to happen, you know, and that's the way they can do it with it. I think it's the different body types. I think it's the different kinds of ways you can do things. I think the variation does just come from the fact, to me, at least somewhat, that you have Stewie, but then you have Jonquel in the back end. And if you do want to play Stewie at the 5, maybe you don't want to do it for a whole quarter. And I mean, based on the minutes we've seen in the playoffs so far, like, that's not going to happen. They might just be on the court the whole time. It's possible. These teams are both really top heavy. Yeah. I think you could just see
how much the Liberty are going to play their bench, which is something you've pointed out throughout the semifinals, right? Do they go back to Kayla Thornton? Do they go back to Maureen Johannes?
So Maureen Johannes is my X factor for this, because if you go back to the games, not every game, but the games where they have played Vegas, she has had moments where I think it has really popped. I think the game that they won, I think this was the Commissioner's Cup game. She had 15, was 5 of 7 from 3 in that game. She's had games this year where she can just let it fly, and then she's barely played in the playoffs. Here's her minutes totals in 5 playoff games so far. 4 minutes 56 seconds, 4 minutes and 13 seconds, 13 minutes and 34 seconds. That was the 15-point loss to the Sun. 2 minutes 59 seconds, and then 16 minutes and 32. And then there's a game missing here, I believe. So
she probably was a DNP.
She was a DNP in that last one.
So yeah,
there we go. So here's my thought with her. I understand there are some defensive concerns. I think that is part of who she is, and I think if you're saying, well, we have Vandersloot, we have Sabrina, can we put another target on the floor for Jackie Young, for Kelsey Plum, for Chelsea Gray to maybe get in a PNR and do that? I just think, I think those, except for Chelsea Gray and a little bit Jack Young, I don't think those guards are big enough to really bully her in the way that I think causes the problems with Johannes' defense. Like, I think Johannes' defensive problem is when she can just get kind of backed down and beat up by a bigger guard, and that's not exactly how these Aces guards play, right? Like, that's not how Kelsey Plum plays. She's tough, she's strong, but is she going to bully you into a tough midi? Like, no, that's not how she's going to play. maybe you're not going to ride her, Johannes very long if she's not shooting well. If she comes out and misses her first 3 she's probably getting pulled. Or has a blows a defensive time, she's probably getting pulled. But I think in a series with the margins as close as this, the potential upside of rolling her out there and saying, we need you to cook a little bit and relieve some pressure off of Stewie, relieve some pressure off of Sabrina and Vandersloot, and give another shooter that isn't Laney. I think there's a lot of value in her if she can have a role in this series. I really think there's a path for her to have an impact in this series in a way she just wasn't going to have against the Sun.
Sure, I think it's a good one. I think you look at the Aces and the fact that they don't have any scoring off their bench. They have Alicia Clark, who can make some threes and will be a vital part. She was the 6th player of the year this season in the league, but she's there for defensive versatility, spacing the floor, providing some physicality and toughness. She's not that. And aside from her, like, she's probably the only real bench player we're going to have to worry about or talk about for the Aces this series. Like, that fatigue factor and depth factor is really going to come into play for them. So just from that standpoint alone, if Johannes can average 8 to 10 points a game in this series, that's 8 to 10 points the Aces aren't going to have an answer for. And so, yeah, how do they mix and match her in lineups? Can she survive on the court? Are the Aces ready to pounce when she's out there? I think all that's going to go a long way because we've talked about Dolson, now we've talked about Johannes. If those two can't make an impact, I don't think Niara Sabali's ready.
Nope.
You're suddenly talking about New York not having much of a bench either. So one of them has to, because it is something that they should be able to wield, and Kayla Thornton being the last one. So we'll see. You have a question in here of what's at stake. I'm assuming we're talking about besides a championship.
Well,
I didn't see you put a note in our thing to skip it.
But
it is worth briefly talking about if you want to, because I'm curious what you meant.
So when I thought about this, I think when we go to like an NBA Finals, I think so much part of the media discussion is often what's at stake for this person's legacy, what's at stake for this team, this person. I think just considering, Brendon, that like these are two super teams that Asia and Brianna Stewart are going to go down to like inevitably when their careers end, and they're still a long ways from being done. These are two players that are going to be on the pantheon, barring like injuries or something. Like these are players headed for the greatest, among the greatest that have ever played women's basketball. Like we are headed there with both of them. It's undeniable. So to see them get to go against each other in the first year of the Liberty, for an Aces team that I think absolutely is going to have to evolve as it goes forward, just considering the lack of depth, I think this is just a big moment for both teams to kind of stake their claim for this era. There's more challengers coming. Yeah. I mean, I think, like the Wings are coming. Like I think other teams are going to be on the upswing and make this maybe not a 2-team league in the future. But right now, these are the powers. These are the world powers. And seeing them get to go head to head and who gets the first series win between both of them and what could really be a multi-year series matchup, that's a big deal. And for the Aces in particular, if they win, they're the first team in like 20 years to win back-to-back titles. You want to put yourself in history. Yeah. You do this, you stamp it, you're there forever. And that's as simple as you can get as stakes.
Yeah, I think the Aces stakes is exactly what you just said. It's only happened one time ever besides this. Well, it's happened twice, I think, but both of them were 20 years ago in the WNBA for a champion to repeat, and that describes everything you need to know about their side. I think for the Liberty, I go to one, it would be their first championship, and this is one of the original WNBA franchises, but it's really hard and really rare in any sport to change teams, be the best player on multiple different organizations and win a championship. And that's what we would be talking about with Brianna Stewart. Like I've said it before, I'm sure on this show, but I believe it. She's one of the greatest winners in the history of basketball. When you go back to UConn, 2 championships for the Seattle Storm, doing it on another franchise with a different context in year one would be massive. And we don't know. Courtney Vandersloot's under contract next year. But what is she going to be, for the rest of her career? Jonquel Jones is a free agent. We expect her to come back. But, they're also, because of how tenuous building this team was, already sort of on a year-by-year type of situation as well. So you never know if you're going to be back here. I think even though it's year 1 for the Liberty versus kind of, year 5 or 6, but even year 2 for Vegas, like there is a lot of pressure, I think, on New York to get this done too. That said, my prediction is Aces in 5.
I think Aces in 5 is probably the rational pick, Brendon, but I'm going to stick with my Liberty prediction that I've held for a while now. I'm going to go Liberty in 5. And if I were to pick an MVP, I think it's Jonquel Jones as series MVP.
Okay. Well, I'll go with Asia Wilson because that's not very Chelsea Gray won it last time, but I think if it's given the depth problems at center, I think if the Aces are going to win it, it's going to be Asia. They are minus 210 on BetMGM. The Liberty are plus 170. That feels probably right, considering home court advantage and everything else. But yeah, I mean, I really just went down to like they're going to be at home in Game 5, so I'll just pick them. Like I'm not expecting a blowout. I think all these games are going to be incredibly close and incredibly fun, and we got what we all wanted.
Yeah, you got some good odds over there. With
thinking about a little Liberty bet there.
Well, you can bet like this. Like 5 games is plus 225 at BetMGM. I just think this series is going 5.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, last year went 4 and it was Connecticut, and like you said, it wasn't like a crazy close series. The WNBA is just weird, right? It's like when you have 5 games, it's hard to win 3 in a row. So it's inevitably going to go long because long is not very long.
Yeah, I would be really tempted if I were going to do this. I'm on a little bit of I'm pausing myself, kind of controlling myself these days. But Aces to win Game 1 and Liberty win the series of plus 500.
There you go.
I might like that. That's tempting. That's troubling for me.